And again, I'm asking another question off the list. Sorry. But you and I discussed this previously. The one thing that I found quite interesting about the platform is the stories that advocates have to share about, being on this platform and the value that they gain through just helping other people. So do you want to, and you mentioned out how in your, I think, Thursday barbecues, you share those stories.
Oh, yeah, we do. I mean, actually we have the way we do it is we have a company stand-up. We have like several rituals. So because I worked so much in like employment and branding for companies, and we actually were getting into doing like a lot of culture work. Like, so to me, it was really important to have like rituals that sort of like were kind of feeding our culture and creating a culture that was what we wanted. So one of the rituals that we have is we do this like Friday stand-up, and everybody's in our office like standing there basically. We kind of like run through like the key founders. John, who's our CEO, will talk about partnerships and kind of like what's going on and things in his head. It's usually pretty quick, but usually it's sort of like inspirational about just like growth and things of where we're headed. And then I will talk about, since I'm leading the engineering team, I'll talk about all the things we got accomplished. So the engineers all feel, like they've actually like built something that people are using, that they can feel proud of. So we'll talk about the great accomplishments of tools that they made. And also our COO was basically saying like, you got to tell me when some of these features come out, because sometimes he gets blindsided by features because of the way they pop out. And then our COO, who runs customer success, and he will go through and like read stories from job seekers and from advocates. And those are just incredibly inspirational, because we have so many people who love the platform, so many great stories of people getting hired, like through the connections they made. And just, there's a lot of unexpected goodness that we found that people got out of the platform about making connections. And I think we sort of always believed that there's a lot of magic in, when two people connect together, just even for like casual conversations. And more when I was looking at the industry and looking at all of the technology, I had so many clients who were asking me all the time, like, what about this technology? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And they all just like looked bad to me, and not from the perspective that they didn't work, but it just felt like every recruitment-related tool was all about kind of like moving people like further apart. So you take like 100 years ago when people would go get a job, right? You like walk from your place out in the middle of nowhere down to the sawmill, and you like ask the guy because your cousin told you like he thinks he's hiring, and you have a conversation with the guy, and if he's got a job, then you get it. And like ever since then, every tool just like moves people further and further apart. And there's just like magic when people actually get together and get back to those roots of like, I have a job, I need a job, like let's have a conversation. And so there's just a lot of magic that comes out of that. So he reads those stories, and I think they're really inspirational. Everybody really loves it.
What's been your learnings to date with regards to growing user volumes?
Oh, it's hard. It was way harder than I thought. And I don't know if, I would love to think that it's hard because we have a product that no one's really ever been in the market with before, that we've got job seekers who are just used to putting the resume through an online applicant tracking system and aren't really thinking about using a tool for networking. But boy, it's just, growth is just really hard. Finding the right audience. For our audience, it feels like sometimes we've got to catch them at the right moment. College kids are super optimistic about their job prospect. Like, you graduate from college, you're just like, who doesn't want to hire this guy, right? But after like 3 months of like looking for a job, you're like, oh, am I ever going to get a job? Like, what's wrong with me? And yeah, it's just like sometimes we feel like we're trying to catch people at the right moment, and trying to explain to them. Basically, everyone who are experts in user experience say, nobody reads anything. No one's going to scroll below the fold. Like, that's it. So how do I come up with 3 pithy words that explains what we do when you've never seen it before? So it just feels like, wow, there's so many of those challenges. So growth has just been really hard. I mean, the focus has been one that's really tough, but you've got to look at so many different things. And I think, you have to look at both quantitative and qualitative. You've got to like be looking at metrics, looking at what people are doing, but then you have to go talk with people, and you actually have to like find out from them, why did you use this? Why didn't you use it? Why would you use this? Why wouldn't you? So we're trying to do. There's a lot of that, and it's just so much data to distill, and then it's just data. You've got to then pick insights out of it. Like, why did people behave a certain way, or why do they think that we're shady? Like, why do they think the name PurpleSquirrel might be unprofessional? Right. And if you don't know what the term is, like, I will explain it because it's.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah. I'm sure people are wondering. So, does anybody know what the term means? Okay, so are you in talent acquisition, HR?
No, I had a friend who used it, and we were talking about trying to hire someone else into a group we both worked in.
Okay, so, and you said you knew what it was?
I Googled it before.
Okay. Anyone who's worked in like talent acquisition, HR, like knows the term that it's basically like describes the ideal candidate. And it's used in like a few different ways, but often it might be used like, I guess the way I always thought of it was, recruiter gets a description from a hiring manager, and it's so specific that you're like, I'm never going to find this person. Like, I'm looking for like a purple squirrel. But if you Google PurpleSquirrel, you did see that there was like somebody who found a purple squirrel. Like, it's hilarious. There's like a hilarious thing on that. So believe me, like we've looked at like every web page about purple squirrels, some of which are like not safe for work. But there's some hilarious ones of like some couple in like Pennsylvania that like caught a squirrel that was actually purple.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Probably not really interesting,
Right.
but it's funny nonetheless. Still cracks me up.
How big is the PurpleSquirrel team today? And what's the makeup in terms of sales, marketing, development?
Sure. So we've got 7 full-time people. So there's 3 founders who kind of lead the executive team. We've got somebody running customer success. We've got I have 3 terrific engineers, and then we've got part-time head of product, and then from there we've got lots of interns that we use who kind of rotate through.
And you have some partners as well, I think.
Some
partners that you work with.
Yes, like you guys, actually.
What have you done to try and get the right people on the bus, and what's worked and what hasn't?
Yeah.
Right people on the bus. I mean the Jim Collins.
Hire the right people. Yeah. It actually has not been really hard for us. I think mainly because we totally believe that like the way that the right people get hired today is sort of the way that we're trying to promote through our platform. So we go looking for people through like referral sources. Right. So the engineers that we looked for all came through some kind of referral, and either like had referred each other or referred some other like school that they went through, and like we found somebody who there could like name people. Almost everybody came through some kind of referral, and actually that's one of the biggest values of what our VCs do is they always get people who come through. Like, so the downside of their business is like they have investments that go under all the time. So then the plus side is then we sort of like reap the benefits in the form of great people who like from those startups, or like half of our like equipment and furniture came from other startups that folded, where they'll like tell us like, oh, someone's folding, like you should go like raid their office. So we'll go there and just start buying up everything. So there was like 3 weeks, 3-week period where like we bought a whole bunch from this startup called Washio. That was a laundry delivery startup. So we bought a whole bunch of stuff from them, including they had these beautiful framed pictures like of employees. And we basically like found where we were gonna hang them, and like we put them all up, but we had a hard time like getting them apart to like change the photos. So for like 3 weeks, we were actually all looking at photos of like this startup that folded, like all their employees.
That's no problem.
And it did turn into like, it was kind of like a joke at first, but then we were kind of like, we did sort of realize that this was kind of like the ashes of another startup. So it was sort of reminding us like we needed to like really be focused. Otherwise, we didn't want to end up like Washio. Yeah.
Well, hopefully all those Washio people are at a good place now. Hopefully they've used the PurpleSquirrel platform to find
We did, in fact, and we interviewed some people from there too. They had like some great people. The guy who sold us all the stuff, in fact, we interviewed him.
maybe for sourcing.
He was actually like, I think he was their head of marketing, and his last job there was basically to like hawk all their stuff and like haggle on like their sofa and equipment. It was super funny, but that, I mean, like that's what you do at a startup. Is like you wear all these different hats.
You do.
Yeah.
How did you build out the MVP version of PurpleSquirrel, and what, if anything, would you do differently in hindsight?
Oh yeah, I would do like everything differently. So that was something that got started before I met John and one other founder, Jim. They actually got this started because they were getting impatient and they hadn't like nailed down a tech co-founder yet. So they'd really just done research, and then they knew that they needed to put together something working to get funding. So they worked with an onshore partner to build it, and they basically built what could only be described as like a technology house of cards. So when I came along, it was basically a pile of cards, like on the ground. Like it just didn't work. It was super broken.
No house.
And no, it was just a pile of like junk. And we already, we had a lot of plans and a lot of like, there was a lot of timings that we needed to really get worked out. So, and I was still working. So I basically like fixed it. I kind of put the pieces back together, made it work, sort of like just enough to sort of be able to get users on, see how, test the ideas and see how it worked. And then, so the reason it was a problem beyond the obvious was that we really needed to hit the ground running when we closed the round of funding. And we were super clear with all of our VCs that we had to like stop and spend like 3 months, just throw that away and completely rebuild it. But that was 3 months of growth that we lost because we couldn't really iterate on that platform. It worked, and it worked really well by the time like we got it up and moved it along, but it was just like we couldn't grow with it. So that took 3 months to get, 3 months lost basically. So what I would do is, I think what I would do differently, that thing was way more than an MVP. It was way too polished. It had way too much stuff in it. What I would have done is I would have worked with a partner to build something that was a much cruder proof of concept that we could have gotten to much quicker. Because this other company spent, I think, 3 or 4 months on it before we fired them. And then it took me another 4 months working like part-time on it to actually finish it. So what I would have done was I would have had somebody build something in 3 weeks that was enough to just test. And then I would have started on something that we could have iterated on and grown with. That would have been much better.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. What to choose?
I know.
I'm going to choose this one. You were with JWT for 20 years. You rose up the ranks to become CTO. What advice would you want to give others who have aspirations to be a CTO? Well,
CTO, I guess I learned throughout my career that there's two different types of CEOs, or CTOs. And actually, I'm sure there's many more, but this is just a simple way to describe it. I started off as the first kind of CTO, which was sort of like working through IT, basically making technology decisions, working under a CIO who's ultimately responsible for all of the data. You're typically responsible for data, security, and the CTO's, that guy who's like picking the technologies, making sure everything kind of works together. And then the sort of CTO that I am now is really more of is really about building like a product, like getting it to market. And the latter kind of CTO is much more aware of like product and how product like drives like users. I think many CTOs are like almost like partial product managers because they just get so into like what's moving the numbers, and their teams are building it. So they get more connected to a product. They're typically like looking at a actual like technology product. I think the latter to me was way more fun. For me, like moving my way up I guess in some ways I sort of got lucky in that when at the beginning of my career, I got a job as a system administrator at JWT, and basically just like worked my way through kind of every job there. I guess I would have to say the key thing that I did to keep myself moving was just shamelessly ask for any open job that was like higher up than me, whether I thought or anyone thought I might be qualified or not, and then prove that I could do the job and just keep kind of like working my way through. And I probably would have left a lot sooner if I'd stopped learning or felt like I wasn't really moving forward. But I was lucky enough that there was sort of always like a place to move, and I just was able to kind of continually move up. And then, once I had hit that level, I kind of got tapped to start helping build things for clients. And that's when I got on that other side of like being involved in product. And I was always like a builder just by nature. So I really liked creating things, and the IT side wasn't as much fun. It felt like the IT side is really about like keeping things safe and sort of like what you can't do. And I feel like the product side is really more about like what like you can do without getting in too much trouble.